through these and play another one twice or something. Here we go. Hawaiian War Chant. One, two, one, there we go, in the mood.
I know you said we might have to repeat a song twice. Couldn't we do the full version?
We're gonna play in the mood right now. We're playing in the mood. One, two, three,
We gotta give it to him.
With the cut.
With the cut.
With the cut. Ready? 1, 2, loud. 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, and.
Watch your stand.
Good morning. My name is Tamora Johnson, and it is my privilege to welcome you to the Neuqua Valley Veterans Ceremony. My father, Derek Johnson, served in the Air Force. I am thankful for the opportunity to be one of your hosts today. I'd like to take a quick moment to thank the Jazz Orchestra under the direction of Mr. Lau for providing the music this morning as everyone entered the auditorium. Let's give them a nice round of applause.
Good morning. My name is Jack Bertulis. My father, Colonel Todd Bertulis, proudly serves in the Army. I'm so pleased that I can honor him by being here today. The pictures you saw as you walked in the auditorium were of veterans related to Neuqua Valley students. We are grateful for their service.
Good morning. I'm Lauren Glenn, and my mother, Alice Harston, served in the Air Force. In addition to being proud Wildcats, we have great respect and appreciation for those who have made an admirable choice to serve and defend our country. We are also extremely proud to say that we all have a loved one who has served or is currently serving. Thank you all for being with us today.
I have a pleasure this morning to introduce Staff Sergeant Clifford Hess for the United States Army for posting of the colors, and Petty Officer Stuardo Juarez from the United States Navy, who will lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance. Please remain standing until you are asked to sit. Posting the colors today are 4 Neuqua Valley students who have earned or are in the process of earning the honorable distinction of Eagle Scout or Silver Award.
Color guard, attention! Color guard, forward, march! Color guard, halt! Color guard, prepare to post the colors. Post the colors.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Color guard, salute. Color guard, retreat. Color guard, halt. Color guard, dismiss.
Please remain standing for the singing of the national anthem performed by Neuqua Valley Senior Amy Wang.
Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we held at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight o'er the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming, and the rocket
You may be seated. Our theme for the Veterans Ceremony is the choice to serve. Today, we'll have the chance to honor 3 of our parents who made the choice to serve, my father included in that group. We also have what will most likely be the once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. We have 6 veterans who served in each of the last 6 major conflicts, with one of our guests even serving in World War II. Finally, we'll enjoy some meaningful music from our Neuqua Valley Chamber Singers while we honor through photographs and music Neuqua Valley staff and family members who have served. At this time, I'd like to welcome my father, Colonel Todd Bertulis, to the stage. This May of 2023, my father will have completed a 30-year active duty career within the United States Army. During that time, my dad has had the opportunity to command organizations from a detachment of 17 to a brigade of 1,700. It all began when he graduated from Purdue University in December of 1992, where he received his commission through the Army ROTC program. My dad's initial duty station was Korea. He then returned to the United States, serving in Fort Bragg, North Carolina, in the 82nd Airborne Division. That assignment motivated my father to dedicate the rest of his life to the United States Army. From there, my father continued to lead Army organizations around the United States, deploying twice to Iraq in support of Operation Iraqi Freedom, then deploying to Afghanistan as a battalion commander in support of Operation Enduring Freedom. When my brother Michael and I were growing up, my dad was constantly deploying. Between those 2 operations, he accumulated over 42 months in combat. Although I was young and my dad never talks about it, I realize now that my father and fellow service members put themselves in harm's way defending our freedoms. 8 years ago, the Army moved my family to Europe. I remember my dad spending a lot of time with the NATO allies in Europe in case of a crisis like we see in Ukraine today. Finally, I'd like to say, Dad, thank you for all you've done, not only as a service member, but as my father. One of the best memories I have is helping pin you as a colonel in Washington, D.C. many years ago. I'm so proud of all you've done, and I'm excited for what's to come. Thank you for your service. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. The reason why I'm here speaking to you today is that I come from a family with a military background. My dad, Derek Walter Johnson, served in the United States Air Force as an F-15 fighter pilot from 1992 to 2012. So what does it mean to have a parent serve in the military? Personally, for me, most of my dad's service was seen through the eyes of my youth. From the time I was born to when I was about 8 years old, so one could say I was too young to understand and see the full extent of my dad's assignments and military involvement as I do now. But here's what I've come to recognize. Being in a military family meant making many sacrifices and dealing with the stresses, pressures, and demands of military life. One of them had to be moving, which meant always having to readjust from relocating from places like Virginia, Nevada, and Maryland for my dad's missions and training. Another big thing was my dad always having to work, which meant losing some time with him as he had to devote a lot of his time to supporting and defending the country. Another big thing was dealing with the unexpected, which meant as a kid sensing the tense and stressful environment when he had to be deployed across seas to places like Iran, Saudi Arabia, and in Europe. In the end, sacrifices are necessary and expected for veterans and their families when they are fighting for something much greater, the values of the nation. Through the years of service, there are relationships and experiences that shape into stories to leave that legacy. Today is a time to experience history, recognize all those who served and their families, appreciate their sacrifices, and appreciate those who are in attendance today. Thank you, Dad, and thank you, veterans.
I'd like to introduce my mother, Staff Sergeant Alice Harston. My name is Lauren Glenn, and I come from a military family. This is my mother, Alice Lorraine Harston. She was in the Air Force from October of 1996 to October of 2000. She spent most of her time stationed at Nellis Air Force Base in Las Vegas, Nevada, where she was a training manager for the career development courses for incoming airmen. From my mom's experience with being in the military, she learned persistence, hard work, and discipline. Currently, she works at the Department of Veterans Affairs to help other veterans secure monetary benefits from the injuries they sustain in the military. She is confident that choosing service is one of the best decisions she ever made. At this time, I'd like to welcome Neuqua Valley staff, Ms. Emily Bender, to the podium to introduce our distinguished panel of veterans.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for being here. I'm guessing that some of you are probably wondering why we're doing a Veterans Day ceremony on November 10th, when we do have school tomorrow on the 11th, the actual day that it's intended to be celebrated. But the reality is, when we were putting together the theme, making the commitment to serve, we realized that we had a very rare and extraordinary opportunity in front of us to put together a panel that consisted of folks that have served in the armed forces for over 70 years. Folks that's military service in many conflicts spans from World War II to almost current day. What an extraordinary opportunity. We also came to realize that folks that serve in the military just have service in their blood. So once they are retired, oftentimes they're still seeking ways to give back to the community and to serve others. And this group is no exception to that. So many of them will be participating in the ceremonies in Naperville tomorrow. So we're so thankful that you are all here today. What a treat. Now, you may have noticed we have a very distinguished member of the panel up here, and you'll have the joy of meeting the entire panel in just a moment. But I think we'd be remiss if we didn't really recognize this one particular person. This individual, as of next week, will be 101 years young and served in World War II. Would you join me in welcoming, thanking, and honoring World War II veteran, Mr. Don O'Reilly. Still serving. So it is my pleasure at this point to introduce to you Brooke Harrison, who's going to help us learn more about these awesome people and have them tell their stories to us. Thank you, Brooke Harrison.
Thank you for the introduction. It is my honor to serve as your moderator today. So first off, we were just introduced to Mr. Riley, but I want everyone to go around and introduce themselves for themselves. So Don, can you start? Would you like to introduce yourself, the branch you served in, how many years you served, and what conflicts you were involved with?
I was a World War II Army Air Force MP. I was in England with the 8th Air Force. The 8th Air Force was so huge, there was 3 divisions. They called it B-17 Flying Fortresses. Initially, they had to fly 25 missions. If they survived, they could go home. Only half of them either were killed or captured. They got fighter escort, and eventually they had to make 35 missions. They could go home. So nobody was shooting at me as an Air Force MP. At the end of the war, they took some of us ground guys up and actually flew over Dusseldorf, Cologne, and Hamburg and see what the 8th Air Force contributed to the war. That was my first ever airplane ride. I flew 35,000 miles for my company, maybe 35 cents. The first airplane ride I ever had, no seat and no seat belt. When I got home, I went back to where my folks lived, and there was a policeman on the left side, a policeman on the right side, and a policeman across the street. When they heard I was an MP, they said, I was a cheesehead, born in Milwaukee. They wanted to get me to the Milwaukee Police Department. I said, no thanks. I went back to my job at Western Electric Company.
Okay, so for the introduction, I'm going to have you go through what branch you served in, how many years you served, and then what conflicts were you involved with.
My name is Lou Kelso. I joined the Navy in 1952. I was reported aboard a United States naval destroyer off North Korea. I served 4 years in the Navy. I was a member of a search and rescue team picking up downed pilots off of North Korea.
My name is Wayne Fisher, served in the United States Marine Corps, and by the way, today is the 247th birthday.
Hoorah!
Marine Corps, right? I grew up on a farm in southwest Minnesota and went to college. Was fortunate enough to graduate from college. The Vietnam War was heating up, so signed up in the United States Marine Corps because I always wanted to fly, and they're the only one that made sense at that time to me. Got to fly helicopters in Vietnam, flew all of I-Corps, which is the northern quarter of South Vietnam, and came back, some of us from our squadron got to be jet flight instructors, so I'm very fortunate to get both chopper time and jet time, and I'm here today because of our helicopter crew chief, gunner, and Navy corpsman. They say more Marines than we'll ever know in Vietnam, including me. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Kim Woods. I served in the United States Army. I left home, Detroit, Michigan in 1982. I've never moved back. I'll tell you what, sitting on a panel with my comrades to this extent, I feel like my service pales in comparison to what these guys did. But I did serve in the first Gulf War, and it was an interesting experience. I served over 15 years combined with active duty and reserve. I finished my career as a warrant officer, communications and technology, and I do it all over again. And I challenge you guys to some push-ups afterwards.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Captain Jennifer Sloan. I enlisted in the Marine Corps in 2009. I actually grew up in Naperville here and graduated from Naperville North in 2006. As I mentioned, I enlisted in 2009. I went to Parris Island for boot camp, joined my first unit. I deployed to Afghanistan in 2011 to 2012. And then in 2014, I deployed to the Horn of Africa near Djibouti and Somalia for a year. And I came home in 2016, decided to pursue a commission as an officer, commissioned in 2016, and I'm currently with my unit it's actually a unit out of Florida. I serve in the reserves today as a civil affairs officer, and I live in Naperville.
Good morning. My name's Tom Parker, and I served in the United States Army as an aviation officer for 21 years. Left a little town in Florida, went to West Point, and upon graduation from there, went into the active Army for 6 years. Then enjoyed that so much, liked the service, continued that in the reserves and the National Guard to complete the full 21 years. I'm sorry, lost my train of thought. Yeah. It's an Army thing. But I did serve in Iraq in 2003 and 2004. Come home and, like I say, finished out my time in the Guard, did the 21 years, and now serve some time with other veterans at the VFW, trying to help veterans and do as much as we can. Thanks.
Thank you all for being here today, and most importantly, thank you for your service. It's my honor to be able to sit here with all of you. So the first question that I really wanted to ask, and Don, I'll start with you. Why did you choose to serve? Did you have a choice, or were you drafted?
I enlisted early in July of 42, hoping to get in the Air Force, but at that time you had no choice. You just volunteered for service and didn't know where you were going to go. But I was lucky to end up in the Air Force. And being an MP, nobody is shooting at me. I don't know if I answered all your questions.
Thank you.
I chose to join the United States Navy right out of high school. It was actually May 7th, 1952, graduating from Proviso High School way back when. And people continue to ask, why did you join? Well, on the two-block area that I lived on, there must have been 6 or 7 young men like myself, and a couple of that were 2 or 3 years older. And when Korea was attacked by the North, there was 2 of my best friends who lived right across the alley from me who joined the Marine Corps, and a couple of them didn't come back. And they were members of the Frozen Chosen, which is another story I could tell. But when those 2 young men didn't come home, I told my mom and dad, I said, I want to join. And my mom said, well, your brother's already in. And I said, Mom, I said, you and Dad have got to sign because it's my turn. And there was 3 other of my friends who lived in the same area. They asked their mothers and dads if they would want to join with me. And so they came around to our house. The recruiting officer came with, and my mom and dad and all the other moms and dads came around our dining room table. And my dad said, Irene, you gotta sign. If you sign, then Mrs. Betts will sign, then Mrs. Smith will sign. And that's, because we were a very patriotic block. We watched World War II, the stars in the windows, the blue stars, and then the gold stars. And that's why I joined, and I wanted to serve my country. It was the best thing I've ever done because it taught me discipline. It taught me a lot about life, about different individuals, different ethnic groups, and it showed me something. There was a DI when I was going, the drill instructor, and he said, I can always remember him, said, Kelso, you got to have a can-do attitude. And that means you can do anything you want to do. And I got my mom and dad to sign. I reported aboard a destroyer off North Korea, as I indicated, and I was a swimmer and a search and rescue guy. And it was one of the most meaningful experiences I've ever had, good times and bad times. But again, I'd do it over in a heartbeat.
Growing up on a farm in southwest Minnesota, I learned early on that I wasn't a farmer because I was always watching those World War II planes flying in the air, and I'd cultivate the corn out of the ground and stuff, and folks didn't like that. But anyway, I went to college, and the Vietnam War was heating up. This would have been in the early 60s and stuff, and we had a pretty tough lady that was the secretary of our county draft board. She kept track of everybody. So I had about 6 months left of college, and I got my draft notice. I said, I don't want to go this way. So I checked the recruiters out, ended up in signing up in the Marine Corps, as I said earlier, and I never looked back. And again, I'm here today because of my fellow Marines and what they did to take care of each other in Vietnam. Thank you.
When I think about my humble beginnings in Detroit, Michigan, the question is whether I was enlisted or drafted, and I definitely enlisted. I did a year at the university. I actually walked on the volleyball team at Wayne State University. But here's the deal. When I made it to my English class at the university, I didn't really understand what the teacher meant about conjugating verbs. My sister, that's a year older than I, had joined the military. She had joined the Army. When she would come home, I mean, she had everything. So I thought to myself, like, figure out conjugating verbs or join the military. Like, you know, she had wads of money and new clothes, and I said, I know this is materialistic, but think of where I came from, Detroit, Michigan. We weren't poor, we were middle-class family, but as a young adult, I made choices that weren't favorable for me. So I was able to enlist in the military and absolutely change my life, like 1,000 degrees to the good. So I'm happy I did it. I do it all over again, and that's my story.
So I mentioned that I grew up in Naperville. So much like you all, you know, decent home, nice family. I was actually in 8th grade when September 11th happened. So I'd always kind of been drawn to outdoor activities. I was an athlete all my life, so I liked being physical. I didn't really like the idea of sitting behind a desk, and you know, college kind of interested me. But when September 11th happened, I was in 8th grade. And to watch that attack happen on our country, they wheeled the TVs in when they still had TVs on wheels. They wheeled it into our classroom, and we watched it happen in real time. And that was a huge impact on my life. To see our country vulnerable and attacked had a lasting impact. And I knew that at that time, even though I was in 8th grade, I knew that I wanted to be part of the solution, that I never wanted people that I knew personally that were lost in the towers in different parts of our country. I never wanted innocent people to be harmed. And so it was then that I mentally committed to that I wanted to join the military. Through high school, I wasn't sure if I wanted to do the Navy. I thought I wanted to go the medical route. And the Marine Corps does not have medical personnel, as Wayne mentioned. It's Navy corpsmen that provide their medical services. So I went to college for a couple years, pursuing a degree in the medical field. And after a year or two, I said, you know what? If I don't enlist now, I'm going to regret it the rest of my life. And so I enlisted in the Marine Corps. I went through boot camp. Paris Island, as I mentioned, and so in answer to the question, I enlisted. I chose to enlist, and as many of people here have said, it was the best decision I ever made. For me, it was more so a patriotic calling, a defense of people that couldn't defend themselves. It's never sat right with me when people that are weaker are picked on by people that are stronger or perceived stronger. So that's why I enlisted. Was September 11th was a big driving factor, and just my desire to have a more active lifestyle and active job.
Well, for me, initially growing up when I was just a little bitty tiny guy, my dad was career military. He had served 2 years in the Army, 22 years in the Air Force, so I was a military brat. By the time I got to the age where I could kind of understand what the military was all about, he had retired and we lived outside of an Air Force base, like I say, in Florida. You know, seeing the jets flying around and being kind of around the military, I thought, wow, man, they've got some really cool toys and it seems like a lot of fun. But as I got into high school, they had a junior ROTC program. I thought, well, that might be kind of fun. So I got into that as well. And, people have asked me, well, why did you decide to go that route and get in the military? I don't think I ever made a conscious decision to do that. It's just something that kind of evolved, and one day I realized, this is just what I need to do or what I want to do. So like I say, coming out of high school, applied to the academy, got accepted at West Point, went there, completed my active duty time, thought, I really enjoy doing this. and again, continued on with the reserves and the Guard, and like everybody else who said they don't regret it, I don't regret 1 minute of it either.
A recurring theme you hear from all of us today is thank you for your service, and we truly can't say it enough. Thank you so much. So the next question, Don, I'll start with you again. So thinking back to when you served, what was the most difficult experience or what was the most rewarding experience?
The most difficult experience probably was being in a convoy in January of 1943, going about 6 or 8 knots, zigzagging back and forth, the troop ships in the middle, cargo ships outside, and the rest of the convoy on the outside. That was probably the only time that I was in peril. I came back in 4 days on the Queen Mary. If you're ever in Long Beach, California, the Queen Mary is stationed there as a hotel and restaurant, and there's one little room that's still the way it was for enlisted men, with about 12 by 12 with 3 triple-decker bunks. The guys flying those planes had electric heated flying underwear, sheepskin on the outside, and oxygen mask anytime they're over 10,000 feet. Those planes were not pressurized or heated, so just a few moments without the oxygen, they'd be dead. And if the electric firing suit ever went out, they had about 10 or 15 minutes or they were done. So I got off easy. I had a 2.5-year paid vacation in England compared to the flying those planes.
I'd like to start off with the most meaningful experience that I had. And that was somewhere off North Korea. We were operating with aircraft carrier Saipan, which happens to be a Marine carrier, Navy carrier, but we had a lot of Marines on that who were flyers. And you train every day, whether you're on station or not on station, and you hear this, we got a Mayday, Mayday. And you get the real one. This is not a drill. This is not a drill. We got pilots coming back, and then we would get dispatched off North Korea, maybe a mile or 2 off the coast. The pilots did not want to be captured. They felt if they could get to the water, the Navy guys and Coast Guard, but we could find them. So my job was, I was an engineer on a search and rescue boat. At that time, they called them whale boats. I wish we would have had the Zodiacs that the Navy has today, because we could only do maybe 20 knots. And just think back, the 50s, early 50s, there was no cell phones. There were no GPSs. Can you imagine? No cell phones. When they would drop us, the ship was a 320-footer. The whaleboat is a 22-footer, a 26-footer. And we wanted to stay within at least eye reach of our ship because we didn't want to get lost. We had a compass, and it's cold. We're talking 25, 30 below zero. A pilot's life in the water is 7 to 8, 9 minutes. Finally, we put rubber suits on the fighter pilots. But picking up the first person who was alive was probably the most meaningful. It's hard for you to understand, but picking that first guy up, and we got him, and he was alive, and he said, "What took you guys so long?" And because the minutes seemed like hours, hours like days, and that was the best part of my whole career, being able to save a young pilot. and the other side is not having enough, a faster boat, a better helicopter. The helicopters in the early 50s were not very reliable. We had, you probably don't remember the MASH, but we had these little plastic bubbles, and not very fast and not very reliable. And the captain would say, we've got to send a boat. We're not just going to let that helicopter, because, and there was a couple of times we picked up a helicopter pilot as well as the pilot. So that was the best part. I leave you with this. When we left Korea, Korea is known as a police action, it's known as a conflict, and it was known as a war. When I came home, let me tell you, we were forgotten. And for the first time, being on honor flight and going back, it brought new light to not only to the World War II, the Korean, but now the Vietnam veterans, because they didn't have their due. I didn't have my due. We were treated not very well, but when I look at Wayne here, I know how the people in Vietnam were treated coming back was very, very horrible. So don't be afraid to think of that for what they've done, because precious freedom today is because of guys before me, guys after me. Like I was there for the guys after World War II, and then Vietnam came and they were there for us, and there's always somebody there to protect our precious freedom. Thank you very much.
When you all came in today, you walked by a display, a bunch of plaques out there. 11 of those plaques represent the men from Naperville that were lost in Vietnam. The 12th plaque represents all the men and women that served and have passed away that served in the Vietnam War. So take the time to look at it, and we have these banners in our Memorial Day parade, and hopefully we'll have our Vietnam Wall back up next year, a year from now, during Veterans Day week. So we're working on some things to, again, remind everybody. My personal experience, and the reason I brought those plaques, was flying helicopters, probably the most challenging mission was medevac pickups. The reason you're going out to pick a medevac up is because people are getting shot. There's a war going on out there, and talk about amazing training, and the number one thing in your brain is head work, because you got to deal with different circumstances as you go in to pick up the wounded. During the day, we'd have a Huey gunship escort, and he would fly on our tail. So if we were taking fire from right or left, he would roll out and take care of that. Once you're on the ground, you got a matter of seconds, because the enemy is going to start dropping grenades and rockets, anything they got, on top of you. So it's in and out very quickly, and we were challenged to get our wounded to a medical battalion within 15 minutes. Sometimes you couldn't go up you couldn't go up high, 2,500 feet. You stayed on the ground, but the important thing was to get them there. If it was a head or eye wound, you took them right to the hospital ships. The sanctuary and the repose one of them were off the coast if there's any kind of contact. But the wounded, that was really our number one mission, and one of the reasons I stay involved with both the VFW and the American Legion to help, again, our fellow veterans that are coming out of combat now, and they need a lot of help. The last mission of the day, if there were any left out there, were KIAs, those men killed in action. The women that were in Vietnam served in medical battalions. They weren't out in the field. Today they are. But the last mission of the day was, again, bring our KIAs back to base. And it hit me a few years ago. That was the first leg of bringing our KIAs home to their parents. So that's very memorable, and sometimes people ask me, when were you in Vietnam? I was there last night. And I think when you're dealing with combat, we all deal with that issue. So thank you.
I'm going to answer the question in a slightly different way, because what I'm hearing is most of us, all of us on this panel has, the greatest accomplishment for me is the psychology of who I am. What are my strengths? What are my weaknesses? What do I bring to the table as a human being, whether I'm a veteran or a civilian? And what the military did for me was to kind of show me who I am, introduce me to a life that I don't know if I would have met had I stayed in Detroit, Michigan. So what do I mean? The culmination of my career was that I left the enlisted ranks and I became a warrant officer. So psychologically, the military taught me that I could reach great heights. I got that can-do attitude. It created me to a brotherhood and a sisterhood of people who changed my life forever. And for that, I am eternally grateful. A downside of the military was when I was flying away to go serve in the Gulf War. I had never been away from home to that extent. I left my 6-month-old child with my mom. My husband at the time was also deploying to the Gulf War. And I just remember sitting on the big plane that had all of our equipment with it, our trucks, all of our equipment. We sat, in an area separate from our equipment as we were flying to the Gulf. And I just had a melt moment, like where tears started flowing. And I wasn't sad necessarily, but it was just the unknown. I don't even know if it was fear. But whatever that was, I accepted it, and I just leaned into what we were doing. And again, I wouldn't change it for the world.
So kind of following the same vein that Kim mentioned there, the being away from your family being difficult, I would say that, granted there's all sorts of different difficulties that you can face in the military, but I think one of the common themes that everyone can probably agree with is the distance from your family and your loved ones, the missed milestones. Kim left her 6-month-old child. Some of your fellow students whose parents were deployed, when they were school age, they missed graduations, they missed relatives' weddings, birthdays, Christmases, any holiday you can name. Those were missed, and that's because their loved one was overseas. So that was always a challenge, especially when I was deployed or in training, because you don't get to see your family, you don't get to talk to them necessarily. Sometimes you might get a phone call home. But we don't have cell phones. We don't have, you may have the ability to get on the internet and send an email or FaceTime if you're lucky, but if you're forward deployed, you don't have those luxuries. So being away and missing those milestones and events is always a big challenge. But that also leads to our greatest strength and probably one of my most proud or most successful things that I can, relate to my military service, and that would be serving something greater than myself. So when you're forward deployed, you have obviously got Marines or soldiers, whatever branch you're in, to your left and right, and they're all going through the same thing together. So it's that shared hardship. It's serving a cause greater than yourself. In the Marine Corps, we're considered America's 911 service. When something happens in a remote part of the world, the president calls a comment out of the Marine Corps, and it's us that goes out and carries out that mission. We don't debate, hey, should we do this, should we not do this? As Marines, we do what our elected government officials tell us to do. So it's not our place to decide whether it's right or wrong, but we do the mission, and we do it with the Marines to our left and right. And so to me, that would be my greatest success and accomplishment in the military, is the diversity of the people that I've met, the people I've served with, the lifelong friendships I've formed, having gone through those challenging events with Marines on my left and right, and then, like I said, those lifelong friendships.
All right, and I'm going to go back and say everything they've already said. No, actually, I'm just going to kind of summarize, because I think when I look at, what were the most challenging things, the most rewarding things, most of that's already been said. The military, like anything else, it has its goods, it has its bads. I know for me, when I deployed to Iraq, I got a phone call on a Tuesday afternoon. Friday morning, I was gone. I had 2.5 days to get ready to leave my family. My kids were 2 and 4. They had no idea what was going on, but like Kim said, you pack up your stuff, you go, there's the uncertainty, you don't know what's happening, but you go do it anyhow. And I know in Iraq, there were challenging days where things just didn't go our way. People got hurt, people got killed, and it was really tough when those things happened. But then you'd have moments, much like Wayne said, where you get to help somebody else. My unit, we were a Chinook unit, and one of the missions we had is we kind of became a flying ambulance. We'd load up the back with litters, go into Baghdad in the middle of the night to the hospital, load up all the guys that had been wounded that day, fly them out to the airport so they could get back to Germany and get into the hospital. And it was so rewarding to help those guys because they were the ones out there kicking in the doors and getting shot at, not us. So a lot of good things happen amongst all the bad, and you just kind of take it day by day. And like I say, I wouldn't change a thing.
I know that this is a topic we kind of alluded to earlier, but Don, we'll start with you again. I just want to ask, what was it like when you returned home? What was it like when you returned home?
I guess I got ahead of myself. The fact that I went back to my folks' house and the policeman tried to get me to join the Milwaukee Police Department. But other than that, I eventually went on a GI Bill to Marquette University for 8 years at night and got a mechanical engineering degree, and that's how I ended up not being a cheesehead and coming to Naperville and living in Naperville for 50 years.
When I came home, like I indicated before, I didn't feel very good. First of all, I lost my shipmates because I was leaving them, and your shipmate is like your member of your team, and so that was one hurdle I had to get over with. And so when I came home, in that first week, I was so disenchanted. I told my mom and dad, I'm going to go back in. Because at that time, you had 60 days to go back in. They were going to send me to officer candidate school or increase my rate, whatever I wanted to do. In the meantime, my dad got me an application for General Motors. And so I decided, my mom really put the pressure on me you ought to stay home. And so you were very fortunate. So I did stay home, and I went to work for GM, and I went to school as an engineer, and I got a chance to spend a year at Harvard. So, but yeah, people, when you come home, we're all have a different kind of a gut feeling because you lose part, but you're back to your family, and yeah, it's a tough thing to come home sometimes, but I was blessed and I had a good family.
I do just want to say, again, thank you all so much for your service, and we're so grateful to have you here. Not only here that you're able to share your story with us, but all the amazing things you've done for your country and everything that you represent. It has been my honor to be your moderator today, and I just want to give it up again for all of our amazing veterans here and not here for their service.
First of all, I want to begin by just giving a little bit of a challenge to our students. When you hear stories like the ones you just heard, whether it's a personal reflective journey or that of a time of conflict and war, being in the same space as these incredible people today is an amazing privilege. And I hope you take a moment after you leave, not just in the moment, but later on today to recognize that. And because you shared this space with their stories, I challenge you to make their stories a part of what yours is. That does not mean you will walk in their footsteps, have the same opportunities, face the same challenges. But you have learned something today from people that gave you firsthand experience, not stories out of a book, but something they actually did. And that is incredibly powerful if you choose to make it so. So the challenge for you is to make their story a part of yours. So what does that mean? It means sharing what you heard with somebody else, a friend that wasn't here. At the dinner table tonight, when you talk to your family and they ask you how was school, you tell them about this. When you gather for the holidays and see other people that are important in your life that may have had similar experiences, had friends that lived through similar experiences, lost people that were important to them, you will share what you heard today and strengthen the story that they told. You will give their story a much longer life than even they will have, and you will pass those things on. So can we give them another round of applause? And briefly, I want to talk about this idea of service, which is one of the central themes of today's ceremony, and you heard a lot about that from our distinguished guests. The word itself, the word service, has roots back to ancient Rome and the Latin word for shepherd. Now, in those times, a shepherd led a very nomadic lifestyle, but they were a critical component to their village. They were loyal, they were noble, they held a staff of power, and with that came tremendous responsibility. So what does that old idea have to do with our modern interpretation of an ancient word and a modern idea? All of you who you've heard from today were guardians of a flock. Not of sheep, but a set of values that each one of us take for granted on a daily basis, whether that be freedom, whether that be democracy, or something as simple as a way of life, whatever that means for you. Their story now runs through you, and their service is irreplaceable. They are essential to your existence, and the other choices that you have were once in their hands, and they've given to you as each generation must do to the next. We thank you for being powerful symbols of what a shepherd does. A life of putting others first, of leading from behind, of being guardians and protectors of things we hold dear. Thank you. As our choir approaches, I do want to honor our guests. As a thank you to them, we have given a generous donation to the Judd Kendall VFW, Post 3873. So thank you.
At this time, I would like to introduce our Neuqua Valley Chamber Singers who will be singing an American anthem. According to arranger Alan Naplin, throughout American history, music has played an integral role in our country's expression of patriotism. The true potential of our patriotic songs, however, was perhaps never before fully realized as after the tragic events of September 11th, 2001. From the significance of that day, America's collective singing voice gave way to a newly elevated presence for these patriotic songs, a presence that comforted, unified, and enriched a nation in need. An American anthem was written with the intention of further enhancing this new presence for the patriotic standards, America the Beautiful and the Star-Spangled Banner. This selection, an American anthem, attempts to achieve a unity in song similar to that of a nation brought together as never before. The Neuqua Valley Chamber Singers dedicate this patriotic melody to all who have served in the military. Thank you for your tremendous service and bravery. All the pictures in this video represents mothers, daughters, grandfathers, fathers, sons, and relatives of our Neuqua Valley staff. We treasure their service to our country and are pleased to have the opportunity to honor them today.
Beautiful
These words have been used often but carry much weight. The price of freedom is high. We cannot afford to forget those willing to pay it. Today we celebrate America's veterans for keeping this nation the land of the free and the home of the brave. When you see a veteran, take time to thank them for serving our country. Thank you all for being here today. Would you please rise as we retreat the colors?
Color guard, that's it, up. Forward, march. Color guard, halt. Color guard, prepare to retrieve the colors. Color guard, retrieve the colors. Color guard, return. Forward, march. Color guard, halt. Color guard, dismissed.
Remember that your presence here today matters. Thank you, everyone. You are dismissed.